following program is sponsored by CBN.
Coming up, best friends while dating.
We laughed and joked and got along.
Worst enemies after marrying.
It seemed like almost everything irritated me.
These newlyweds were ready to call it quits.
I just want to go home and get this annulled if this is how marriage is going to be.
And divorce papers were ready to be signed.
Hey, my husband's still a jerk.
See what saved their marriage on today's 700 Club.
If you can do a miracle, I'll believe it's you.
Well, welcome to the 700 Club. Not guilty. That's the verdict in the federal trial of Mark Houck. The pro-life advocate says he's overjoyed, blessed, and grateful. He's also eager to return to sidewalk counseling.
Well, his attorneys say the verdict is not only a win for Houck, but also for the whole pro-life movement. Matt Gelka has the story.
Thank you, Lord. We know where two or more are gathered in your name. You are there in our midst. Your spirit is here.
Mark Houck and his family prayed outside of a Philadelphia federal courthouse. Moments earlier, a jury found Houck not guilty of federal assault charges.
Oh, man. It's a relief, overjoyed, blessed. I'm just so grateful.
The pro-life activist was involved in an altercation outside of a Planned Parenthood clinic in 2021. The FBI carried out an early morning raid on his home and arrested him in front of his family nearly a year later. The Department of Justice tried to make the case that the shoving incident between Houck and a volunteer escort in front of an abortion clinic was a violation of the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances, or FACE Act. The jury disagreed.
This matter is one that never should have gotten the attention of the Department of Justice. Our hope here is that a message was sent to Washington, D.C. to stop this harassment of sidewalk counselors who are just trying to provide alternatives to those who are facing an abortion decision. And I hope, again, this will be one of those points where a change is made.
The trial focused on the alleged assault between Houck and the volunteer, which Houck said happened after his son was verbally abused. His attorney said it was also about freedom of speech.
This was about the First Amendment in that Mark and every sidewalk counselor in this country has an equal right to be there on that sidewalk and offer assistance, offer alternatives to folks who otherwise may be considering abortion.
With the trial now over, Houck says he'll return to sidewalk counseling once again.
Sign me up. I'm ready to go back out. Pray.
10 o'clock next week.
Pray. Put me down for 10 o'clock. Pray. I'll be wherever you need me. And yeah, just happy to continue the mission. You know, the mission goes on.
The jury was briefly deadlocked since Friday until an alternate juror was brought in on Monday and a final decision was reached. Houck's attorneys say Houck is ready to testify in front of Congress about the ordeal, and they hope to get an invitation soon. Matt Gelka, CBN News.
Well, I know a Colorado baker who has been repeatedly harassed and repeatedly brought up into courts at the state court level, and it took it all the way to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said, this is a freedom of speech case. This is artistic expression. You can't require someone to make an art form, cakes can be art forms, and violate their conscience. It's against the Constitution. And he's been repeatedly harassed, repeated complaints against him. Any other person would get out of the baking business. And I think that was the goal, to drive it out of the public square and to say, no, Christians can't bake cakes unless they're going to bake cakes for everybody, and gay weddings and trans celebrations and all the things that they brought against him. So when Mark goes back on the sidewalk, I'm pretty sure there's going to be a targeting, and how can they have a provocation, and how can they have another incident? That's what happens. The left just doesn't seem to want to give up. They keep going at it and going at it and going at it. What happened here is you had a full SWAT team deployed with multiple vehicles and automatic weapons that were out and visible in front of his own home, his own children, in a pre-dawn arrest. Why in the world would you do that? He's represented by counsel. Counsel said, we'll voluntarily surrender him. But no, they've got to make a public show. That's what they're doing. These are intimidating tactics designed to quelch speech I've seen it in authoritarian governments where you have this oversized reaction. The government comes in, full police force. They threaten the person. They threaten everyone surrounding the person. And it's all designed to intimidate. Now, we as Christians, what are we to do? Well, the same thing that the apostle said to the Sanhedrin. We have to obey God. And in that, we find our way. I just encourage everyone as we do that, please let us do it in love. In other news, President Biden says he will end the state of emergency regarding the COVID pandemic. John Jessup has more on that story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. John?
Thanks, Gordon. The president telling Congress he'll end both the national emergency and the public health emergency on May 11th. The announcement comes as congressional Republicans are calling for an immediate end to the policies. The White House claims that would create chaos and uncertainty in the healthcare system. The administration's future move will restructure the government response to COVID, treating it as an endemic threat that agencies can manage without special powers. President Trump first initiated the emergency responses 3 years ago today, which have been extended every 90 days. Now to Secretary of State Antony Blinken's foreign trip to Israel. Blinken is meeting today with Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas, encouraging the PA to restore security agreements with Israel. His visit coming in the middle of the worst violence in years. CBN White House correspondent Abigail Robertson reports.
With tensions flaring in the Middle East, Secretary of State Antony Blinken is urging Israel and the Palestinians to exercise restraint and ease tensions following a surge in violence that has the region on edge.
The responsibility of everyone to take steps to calm tensions rather than inflame them.
Despite the attacks, Blinken's meetings with Israeli leaders seem to stay on track, discussing U.S. hopes of a two-state solution for Israel.
As we advance Israel's integration, we can do so in ways that improve the daily lives of Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza. And that's crucial to moving toward our enduring goal of Palestinians and Israelis enjoying equal measures of freedom, security, opportunity, justice, and dignity.
While Prime Minister Netanyahu stressed the value of establishing more peace agreements with its neighbors through the Abraham Accords, Mr. Blinken said they are not a substitute for progress between Israelis and Palestinians. He did, however, reaffirm America's ironclad commitment to Israel's security, including standing united against a nuclear Iran.
Our policy and my policy is to do everything within Israel's power to prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons and the means to deliver them.
Blinken promised continued U.S. support.
Iran is a threat not only to Israel and the region, but increasingly to the world, as we've seen recently in its provision of drones to Russia to prosecute its war of aggression in Ukraine.
The Israeli defense minister saying his visit comes at a critical time.
It sends a clear message to the region. The United States and Israel are united, facing Iran or anyone threatening peace and stability in the region.
But Anaya Kraveen from the Foundation for Defense of Democracies questions how friendly Blinken's conversations truly were.
He shared his concerns about some of the state of the Israeli democracy, alluding to some of the judicial reforms that the government is currently weighing. So I would say that on a whole, they are checking a lot of the boxes and saying the right things. But I think if you read between the lines, Blinken was also made a priority of delivering some warnings on the trip.
Kraveen told CBN News' Faith Nation the real conversation going on is whether or not the U.S. is moving towards a deal with Iran, the world's biggest sponsor of terror.
Until the U.S. says in very direct language they will not pursue reviving this Iran deal and that they are now moving to a plan B, then that's where everyone's focus should be, and that's where Netanyahu keeps trying to bring the conversation back to.
Reporting from Washington, Abigail Robertson, CBN News.
Well, CBN Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell joins us now live from Jerusalem. So, Chris, Secretary Blinken talks about a two-state solution, and I've got to ask, is that even viable anymore, given the state of where the Palestinian Authority is? They seem to want a one-state solution with no Jews allowed. How viable is a two-state solution?
Well, Gordon, first of all, you know, the expectations are very low among Palestinians themselves that anything substantial is going to come out of the talks between Abbas and Blinken, probably going on right about now. Behind the scenes, there's a power struggle about who will succeed Abbas. Right now, he's in the 18th year, believe it or not, of a 4-year term. He's 87 years old. He's not in good health. And he's been in office so long because he knows if he went to elections, Hamas would actually win here in the West Bank. And even a recent poll found that more than 70% of Palestinians, they want Abbas out of office. And what's keeping him in power right now, believe it or not, is the IDF, since they're able to suppress the terror groups like Hamas and Islamic Jihad that represent a rival to Abbas. And then you have the Palestinian media, and you mentioned that, Gordon, they continue the story that Israel has no right to the land. And unlike Blinken, who wants a two-state solution, as you said, they'd rather have a one-state solution, one without Israel.
Well, let's talk about the future then, in a future without Abbas, and assuming that there are elections now. I know the election in Gaza, Hamas won, so now elections in the West Bank. If Hamas wins, does that mean that Israel's now sitting right next to a volcano?
It's possible, Gordon. You know, they represent probably the power other than the Palestinian Authority. And right now, the PA has actually withdrawn security arrangements with Israel right now. That could represent a threat to the Palestinian Authority. You could look at a civil war. That's what happened in Gaza back in 2006 and 2007. Hamas took over from the Palestinian Authority. So it could lead to chaos, could lead to civil war. And I'm sure, actually, what Israel right now is wants the PA in there only because they don't want Hamas or Islamic Jihad taking over power in the West Bank. So it's a very volatile situation if that happens, if and when Mahmoud Abbas may expire.
All right, well, both Blinken and Netanyahu come to these meetings, and they both have agendas. So break down the difference. What does Netanyahu want? What does Blinken want?
Okay, well, Blinken obviously has two priorities, I would say. First of all, he's advocating for a two-state solution, even though many people don't. It's a viable solution. He's also warning about the policies of the new government, and in particular about judicial reform. Now, Netanyahu, on the other hand, he wants to stop Iran. That's his #1 goal, maybe the reason he feels like he's in office. Also, fortifying security at home. And on Iran, as our expert weighed in, it's still unclear if the U.S. has stopped negotiating behind the scenes of the Iranian nuclear deal. And Blinken did say that the military option was on the table. And the U.S. and Israel just finished the largest joint military exercise in their history. But even with all that, Netanyahu made the point and was clear that Israel will defend itself with its own forces if necessary.
All right, well, Blinken seemed to downplay the Abraham Accords. The Biden administration, in terms of foreign policy, it's been called the third Obama administration. So they're going back to Obama's, the whole call that Biden did for a two-state solution based on the 67 borders. John Kerry famously said you can't have peace with the other Arab nations until you first have peace with the Palestinian Authority. The Trump administration turned that upside down and said, absolutely, you can have peace with your Arab neighbors, and you don't need the PA anywhere near it. So why does the administration oppose Israel's peace with its neighbors? Because it seems that they do.
It seems like they do, Gordon, but I don't believe they oppose the making peace with its neighbors. But I think, as you alluded to, that Blinken and the Biden administration, the third perhaps administration of the Obama presidency, they believe in that old paradigm that you first have to solve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict before you can have other deals. And like John Kerry said, you know, he said, there's no peace without Israel's neighbors before you solve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And the Trump administration turned that upside down. And what they did is that they wouldn't let the Palestinian Authority veto, these peace deals with many of these companies, many of these countries, that is. So now they're back to the two-state solution. And I think for the length of the Biden administration, you're going to see that. It remains to be seen if Saudi Arabia is going to come in to the Abraham Accords. That's a rocky relationship between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia, so we'll see. But I think they don't oppose him, but they certainly going back to that old way of thinking.
All right, well, Chris, thanks for the insight, and thanks for joining us. Terry, what's next?
Well, up next, Chinese agents spying, threatening, kidnapping, even trying to kill their own citizens. And it's not just happening in Beijing. It's going on right here in the USA. See why the FBI is powerless to stop it. That's coming up. And then later, so much for the honeymoon phase. This couple was thinking about splitting up on day one. Fights, an affair, and divorce papers followed. See why they're still together and stronger than ever.
I want to discuss with you 3 important questions, the answers to which will determine the course of your life. Where do you come from? Who are you? Where are you going?
Divine Direction, God's blueprint for your future. The latest audio teaching from Gordon Robertson.
What does it really mean to be a child of God? What does it really mean to belong to God? What does it really mean that I'm going to God?
In this teaching, you'll discover God's design for your life, your true identity in Christ, how to find purpose and direction, plus a daily devotional to strengthen your faith.
When God looks at you, he's saying, you're exceptional. You are here for the very purpose that I thought of before the foundation of the world. When you have that picture of yourself, it changes everything.
Divine Direction, God's blueprint for your future. Available now.
Hi, I'm Beth Parkinson, and I want to let you know that our CBN Hopeline team are here, ready to stand with you in prayer and words of encouragement. Call today on 0300 561 0700, or if you prefer, you can text our WhatsApp number on 07833 933 924. You can also email on info@cbneurope.com. However you prefer to get in touch, our CBN Hopeline team are here for you. Reach out today. Thank you, and God bless.
Tomorrow, in the swamps of Virginia,
venomous snakes biting insects and flies.
A refuge for runaway slaves.
It tells us how horrible slavery was.
50,000 called these wetlands home.
The conditions here were better for them than being enslaved.
Many more. The last road to freedom.
If you get to the dismal swamp, you're almost home free.
Their secrets tomorrow on the 700 Club. A network of Chinese agents is at work right here in America. Their mission is to hunt down, intimidate, and even kill pro-democracy dissidents. In cities across the U.S. and the world, these agents operate out of so-called police stations. Dale Hurd brings us the details.
Above this noodle shop in New York's Chinatown, agents of the Chinese Communist government operated an overseas police station for years. There are more than 100 of them worldwide. They don't usually look like a police station. They may only be back rooms, but they're staffed by Chinese government officials. The police stations, along with so-called aid stations across the U.S., are used by the Chinese government to harass and threaten pro-democracy Chinese immigrants to stop speaking out against the regime and go back to China, even kidnapping them if necessary. One of their targets is Li Jianji, a pro-democracy activist who was tortured repeatedly in Chinese psychiatric hospitals before he was able to flee to the U.S., where the persecution has continued. Xi, who does not speak English, told us Chinese government hitmen in the Los Angeles area have tried to kill him 3 times, twice with a car and once by stabbing him in the neck, calling him a traitor as they fled the scene. Chinese government agents and supporters regularly film and disrupt pro-democracy demonstrations in American cities. They warn activists they're being reported to Beijing and that their family back home will be arrested. The world has known about these police stations for many months now. A key question for the U.S. government is why almost nothing has been done about it. A recent New York Times report made it look like the FBI is on the case, highlighting a raid on that Chinese police station in New York's Chinatown. But that raid happened last fall, and the FBI didn't shut it down, it only gathered evidence. When we asked the FBI if it's closed any of the Chinese police stations across the U.S. or brought charges against anyone, it declined comment, saying that FBI Director Christopher Wray's testimony to the Senate Homeland Security Committee last year would serve as the agency's statement on the matter.
We are aware of the existence of these stations. I have to be careful about discussing our specific investigative work, but suffice to say, I can tell you from an FBI director perspective, I'm deeply concerned about this, and I'm not going to just let it lie.
Laura Harth, with the Spanish group that uncovered the extent of these overseas police stations, says it's been a struggle to get governments to do anything about it.
I don't think most of them knew about the police stations, obviously. That's clear from their response. Obviously, we had a response in the US, we had some response in Australia, some in Canada, where the Royal Canadian Mounted Police head came out saying, oh, yes, we know that this is an issue, we will act on it. Yet nothing happened.
Chinese democracy activist Jingyu Wang is a U.S. resident now living under police protection in the Netherlands, where Chinese agents have repeatedly harassed and threatened him. He was in prison for 2 months in Dubai at the request of Chinese authorities and has had to fight off a knife attack in the Netherlands.
How can I help you? Why you call me?
This is a phone call he recorded from the Chinese embassy in Norway, saying he's been reported to police as having a bomb. The Chinese government has imprisoned his parents to force him to return to China.
They asked me go to Rotterdam, Chinese overseas police station for surrender, and they asked me go back to China. They asked me thinking about my parents from 2022 February to 2022, I think April. Almost every day they will make over 100 phone call to me. Every day, like 3 a.m., 4 a.m., keep make phone call to me.
These overseas police stations are only one part of a massive campaign to control Chinese citizens living in other nations. The communist government has also used what it calls Operation Fox Hunt and Skynet to apprehend citizens abroad under the guise of stopping financial crimes.
So the police stations are really just the tip of the iceberg of what we're looking at when we talk about the transnational repression and policing campaigns coming from the Chinese Communist Party to return people to China at all costs, by all means.
Harth says the Chinese government has reportedly forced the return of an incredible 230,000 Chinese back to the mainland between 2021 and last year.
The CCP is attempting to impose its control in every country around the world.
China expert Bradley Thayer believes one reason for the lack of action by the Justice Department has been a failure by American leaders to face up to the China threat.
The lack of responsiveness regarding the China threat is something which has plagued us for decades. This lack of concern which plagues the American elite, and that would be universities, media, so many of our political leaders, Wall Street, Silicon Valley.
The FBI recently asked the Chinese American community to report any harassment by Chinese government agents, which Thayer agreed was odd since the FBI, with its vast spying powers, probably knows who the agents are. Li Jianji wishes the FBI would do something. He told us he reported the attempts against his life to the FBI, but it never responded. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
It is amazing that we would literally allow foreign agents to operate on our own soil and do things against their own citizens who are trying to live in exile. It is absolutely incredible. But here's a thought for you. And for years ago, I used to travel frequently to China. I love the Chinese people, love their culture. It's absolutely incredible, a 4,000-year history. The riches that they have culturally are absolutely astounding. But they have a different view of time and history. Chu Enlai was asked, he was under Chairman Mao, he was asked by a reporter, did the French Revolution have any impact on China? And his response is fascinating. He said, it's too early to tell. So he was saying that in the 1950s. We all know the French Revolution ended the 1700s. And he was saying it's too early. They have a completely different view of history. And in that history, their long view and what is in their strategic interest is completely different from ours. We can't even remember what we're supposed to do next week, let alone try to plan out 100 years from now. Our politicians need to take a much longer view of our engagement with China and how do we have cooperation long term, at the same time standing up for what we all believe, that there is freedom of conscience, that freedom of speech absolutely leads to better outcomes for cultures, that the American Revolution made a huge difference in the world, that the American ideals are worth living for. Right now, they're saying our politics is messed up. We are proof that democracies don't work. You need to have a central organizing committee that specifically trains up leadership for the long term. You need leaders that are in office forever, for their lifetime, so that you have consistency of policy. But we need to say to them, no, that doesn't really work in the long term. What works in the long term is the free exchange and competition of ideas. If you can have that, you have a much better society. Terry?
Well, coming up later, from I do to I hate everything about you. This couple's life together got off on the wrong foot. See how an act of love saved their marriage. And up next, set free from an incurable illness. A lifetime of abuse and addiction landed this woman in a mental institution. Lynn Eldridge takes us to the healing room where she found hope. Right after this.
Superbook at the Big Church Day Out brought fun and laughter to hundreds of kids and their families, teaching them how to have a courageous, adventure-filled life with Jesus. Glitter Time, the big Superbook show, and dance-offs with Gizmo. It was a weekend never to forget. Bring the festival fun home with you and download the app today. With Superbook episodes, games, and activities, you can make an exciting walk of faith part of daily life for you and your kids, sharing Bible time together. Superbook reaches millions of kids in over 80 countries and over 50 languages, with more being added all the time. Become part of the worldwide Superbook family and help us reach even more kids with the life-changing good news of the gospel. Free to download, free to use. Download the app today.
Lynn Eldridge had been given all sorts of labels: unwanted, an accident, broken, bipolar. This is what she'd been told all her life. Then one day, Lynn went to a church service, and there she was given a label that trumped them all.
Author and minister Lynn Eldridge grew up adored by her father, but rejected and resented by her mother. Lynn also dealt with debilitating depression and suicidal thoughts. Turning to alcohol and drugs brought some comfort, but took her to very dark places, dealing drugs and working with the drug cartel. In her book, Bipolar to Beloved, Lynn shares her journey from self-destruction to radical healing and deliverance.
Lynn Eldridge is here with us now, and we welcome you to the program. It's great to have you here.
Thank you. I'm honored.
You write that you were raised in the perfect storm. I mean, as I read about your home life, I thought, boy, how many of us see families that look like everything's going well and functioning well, and underneath all of that is this turmoil. Talk a little bit about the life you were, the family you were raised in.
Well, mine was a normal family, right? It was normal to us. Mm-hmm. And the culture was critical and angry, and the words were painful, but we believed that would make you stronger.
At 17, well, thankfully your dad and you had a very close relationship, which didn't ultimately provide everything that you needed, but it was helpful in the midst of all of that turmoil. At 17, you moved in with your drug dealer boyfriend and wound up actually working with the cartel. Tell us about that.
Well, I had hit a point in my family where I was just like, I've tried to do my best. I can't please anyone. Game on. Maybe what you say about me could be true. Maybe I'm a loser.
So it actually made you rebellious.
It did.
Yeah.
Super strict.
And where did that take you in your life?
If I can't please you, I can't please anyone. What's the point? I have no real desire to live. I really hate my life.
Yeah.
And so give it up.
You went to church. You actually liked God, but you didn't like Jesus very much. Tell us about that.
Well, I kind of got there later in life when I was a, quote, defeated Christian, because it's really an oxymoron. Yeah. Jesus didn't die on a cross so we could be defeated. Yeah. And my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. And then, you know, sometimes we have the knowledge, but not the wisdom to apply it. And gross immaturity was the emotional life that I led. And it doesn't matter how old you are, you can be grossly immature and get stunted in life, even by trauma.
Well, especially by trauma. I think that kind of halts your growth.
Absolutely.
In certain places. Talk a little bit about the times that you felt suicidal, because I think when people struggle with mental health issues, you were diagnosed as bipolar and then discovered later on there was a whole history in your family of people struggling with that. And there's a helplessness and a hopelessness because nobody seems to be able to offer an answer. What was that like for you when you were going through those suicidal times?
Well, I always thought the answer for me was on the outside of me. So maybe when I found the right man, when I got the right job, if I was in the right city, you know, when I had enough money, when... and it was always elusive because nothing outside of me would ever fix that God longing in my soul, the place that I needed healing on the inside of me. I needed Jesus, and I was angry.
So how did you go from feeling like Jesus wasn't the answer for you to Jesus, understanding that Jesus was exactly who you needed?
Right. Well, I just got outsmarted. God outsmarted me.
Way,
yes, it was. It was pain that brought me to my knees. And I got instant freedom once when I was about 17 years old, but I didn't know God's ways. So I didn't get to keep my freedom. I ended up opening doors by dishonoring my mother, by being in unforgiveness about you, because you remind me a lot of my mother, so I'm judging you. And you know, my perception became my reality, and it will become my next book on perceptions.
Yes.
And so I opened all the doors, and everything came back.
Your cousin took you to church, and you went. It was kind of a last-ditch deal, wasn't it, where you had come to the end of your rope and you were contemplating suicide, and just, it was your cousin, so you went. At church, you heard a message that touched you, and someone told you about something called the healing room. What happened?
Right. Well, what really touched me is the man who I still have no idea to this day who he was. He was a traveling evangelist, I guess. And he called out a word of knowledge, which I'd never seen before, and pointed at me and said, I see depression from childhood and addiction. And I'm like, yes.
That would be me.
And I did what I had learned as a kid growing up. I went up to the altar and people started praying for me, and a woman put a card in my hand to a healing room. And I got up and I said, show me one person in this place that Jesus has ever healed. And I got up suicidal, bipolar, hateful. But I went to that healing room a couple weeks later, and this woman came in and she had a word of knowledge. She said, Jesus told me you were coming. He wants me to play a song for you. Come with me. And they played a song about being broken and dying, and no one can help me. By Dennis Jernigan.
Yeah,
and
I love him.
The walls came down. They prayed for me. I started crying, and I told God I'd give him one more chance. You had compassion on the multitude, and you healed them all. You're not a respecter of persons. You're not a man that you should lie. Show up or kill me, because one of us is going to do that.
Yeah.
You know, I find it hard to believe that you healed them all. I'm one. Yeah. I'll give you all I have one more time. Let's go big or go home.
Talk to people who are watching us right now, thinking really just what you thought. Right. There's no hope for me.
He is the God of hope. He is hope personified. And when I put down my anger and my self-hate and asked him for help, he helped me learn how to get rid of all of that. People came into my life in a little town in Illinois, didn't need some big place. God provides. You ask, you seek, he will come. He will come to you in your own home, or he will come. Because Psalm 116 describes it. I cried out to the Lord, and he heard my prayer, and he cut me free from the cords of death. And he is no respecter of persons. If he'll do it for me, he'll do it for you. He does show up for those who seek him with all their heart. And I was given a gift of desperation. And I pray that if you're feeling that desperation and suicide, that you listen to the voice of love. He's not angry. He's not judgmental. He's not displeased with you. He's in love with you. It's a love story.
And he takes the broken pieces when you offer them to them, and he makes bread for others to feast. And you have done that with your book, Bipolar to Beloved, and it comes with a wonderful companion workbook. And I know this will make a huge difference in the lives of so many people. Just thank you for being so vulnerable and sharing your story and helping others to find the same freedom that you've found then.
Thank you very much. Also on my website, there's a suicidal thought renouncement card.
Awesome.
And it can be downloaded.
Okay. Tell us your website.
It is LynnEldridge.com, and that's ELDRIDGE.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. Again, the book is called Bipolar to Beloved, A Journey from Mental Illness to Freedom, and it is available nationwide. If you need someone to talk to, our phone lines are open, and there's a friend on the other end of that line who would love to talk with you, pray with you like a friend prayed with Lynn. Our number's toll-free, 1-800-700-7000. Great to have you here today.
Thank you very much.
Gordon?
Up next, the final fight. After years of a rocky marriage, this couple were ready to throw in the towel. She went to stay with her mom. He went to stay with a friend. See how a miracle saved their marriage right after this. Hello, I'm Gordon Robertson. My latest teaching is about you and where you come from. More importantly, where are you going? In this teaching, you'll discover 3 of life's biggest questions. How you answer these very important questions can hold the keys to your future.
In Gordon Robertson's latest audio teaching, Divine Direction, you'll discover the keys to a fulfilling life, what it means to be a child of God, how to correct negative self-talk, plus a daily devotional to strengthen your faith, and so much more. God has uniquely made you. You're the only one of you in all of human history. You are the only one to accomplish the mission that He has specifically crafted you to fulfill. I hope this teaching will encourage you to go for God's best. Get Divine Direction, available now.
I remember just walking through the wilderness and just mesmerized by the nature. The beauty, the silence. But in the midst of that silence, God began to reveal Himself to me. God showed me what I had become. I just got up and I said, I need something greater than me. When you've tried everything and nothing's worked, cry out to Jesus.
Welcome back to Washington for this CBN News break. 2 more officers involved in the arrest, beating, and death of Tyree Nichols have been relieved of duty. 3 EMT workers with the Memphis department have also been fired. 5 officers had already been fired and faced criminal charges in Nichols' death. The fire chief says an investigation found the EMT workers violated multiple policy and protocols, failing to meet expectations. Funeral services for Tyree Nichols are scheduled for Wednesday. Well, tens of millions of Americans are under severe weather warning as potential ice storm threatens states from Texas to Tennessee. Authorities are cautioning people to stay inside as a blast of Arctic air is bringing frigid temperatures and bone-chilling winds. Freezing rain could bring up to 3/4 of an inch of ice in some places, making travel risky and potentially bringing down trees and power lines. So far, more than 1,600 flights have been canceled, mostly in Texas, as ice builds up on planes and degrades runway conditions. Well, you can always get the latest from CBN News by going to our website at cbnnews.com. Gordon and Terry will be back with more of the 700 Club right after this.
You've got everything you thought would make you happy. A promising career, plenty of friends, and a growing family. But life seems empty. Something's missing. Only God can bring real meaning to life. True happiness comes from knowing Him. Discover how God can change your life. Watch the 700 Club.
Josh was a control freak. Emily had to have things her way. At first, their marriage was a constant cycle of fight and makeup, and then they had enough. All that was left was for them to sign the divorce papers.
We argued on our honeymoon in the hotel room about anything and everything.
From day one, Emily and Josh Bengen's marriage was in trouble.
And I can remember thinking, who is this person I married? I just want to go home and get this annulled if this is how marriage is going to be.
Married in May 2014, the couple were best friends for years before deciding to date, then get engaged. Now, as they settled into married life, their personal issues quickly surfaced.
I turned into a very negative person towards her. It seemed like almost everything irritated me.
I can be very vocal about how I want things to be done, and it is kind of my way on certain things. We would have these volatile fights, and it would be total anger and chaos, and maybe the silent treatment for a day or two, and then it would be like the kiss and make up, let's pretend that never happened, I'm so sorry. And it just felt like this constant repetition of fight, make up, and you never knew who you were gonna get.
Barely 4 months after their wedding, they were in pastoral counseling trying to fix their marriage. However, they never uncovered their deeper personal issues, and Josh only grew more verbally and emotionally abusive.
I wanted, when I got married, to be married to my best friend. I wanted to have kids with somebody who was my best friend, that we laughed and joked and got along, and yet I had somebody who told me that I was ugly and didn't want to be with me, that they hated everything about me.
Emily felt like God wasn't listening, so she found a sympathetic ear at work, her boss. Soon they were texting secretly outside of office hours. It went on for months. By early 2016, Emily was caught up in an emotional affair.
There was an excitement there. I had a friend who was listening. I had a friend who liked everything about me. And so I did have confliction with, what we were doing. It was secretive. I knew it was wrong.
I was so removed from our marriage and any kind of relationship with her. If there were signs, I completely had been checked out of that.
In late August, Emily's emotional affair turned physical.
I was mad at first, and then when the anger dissipated, I was back to, hey, my husband's still a jerk, and you're still not, and we're getting along, and this is what happened, and now at this point, this happened, so why stop now? It felt good to have somebody who fit the category, who actually loved me, or what I thought was love.
By Thanksgiving, Emily and Josh's marriage was all but over. After another bad fight, Emily left to stay with her mother.
I did not tell my mom that I had had an affair. I just told her that my marriage was done. And I finally was like, okay, at least one thing in my life is now straightened out.
I didn't know what to feel. I was in complete shock, and I was just in such a state of disbelief.
Eventually, Josh moved into their pastor's spare room so Emily could stay at their house. It was then that he started to realize his role in their problems and began asking God for answers and forgiveness.
I was obviously praying for her and whatever is going on, but I was also praying for myself because I was a very selfish, very controlling, probably even manipulative and angry person. I felt so broken and so lost, just got a complete loss of how did I get here? How did we get here?
Meanwhile, as Emily also sought God's guidance, she had to face the role she played in their failed marriage, including the affair.
I never meant for this to happen. My marriage was like crumbled, dead, gone, done. And I said, God, if you can do a miracle I'll believe it's you.
With divorce papers ready to be signed, the couple decided to meet on December 30th to discuss whether their marriage could be saved. The first thing Emily did was confess the affair.
The first few minutes were just complete and utter shock, like couldn't even quite process. My mind couldn't even think of how to react, how to emotionally respond.
I really did pour my heart out in asking for forgiveness, and I said I was sorry. And I had truly ended the affair that day. It was done.
I felt the Lord come over me with peace. I had asked her to forgive me, and I just had to love on her, and I just felt that love in me to love on her.
As an act of love and forgiveness, Josh washed Emily's feet.
And here's my husband, where I had done so much wrong to him. And he says, I love you no matter what. We'll get through this. And I just felt so forgiven. I felt so free. And in that moment, I just wept. I just lost it.
In time, through forgiveness, counseling, and recommitting their lives to Jesus Christ, Emily and Josh found healing in their marriage and their personal struggles as well. Today, they are happily married with 3 beautiful kids. They know that surrendering to God was the only way to save their marriage.
A heart and a head surrendered to the Lord is the most important thing. To learn who He is intimately, to know Him intimately, is the biggest thing that you can do in your walk and affect others around you.
God is bigger than your circumstance. It's never too late. That God can always do a miracle. He's always with you. Even in the ugly moments, He's there, right there with you. And that He can still change all of your ugly if you just have a little bit of faith.
He can take ashes and make it beautiful, make something beautiful out of it. He is able, and He is able, willing, and ready to forgive you and to cleanse you and to make you new again. Marriage, when it's based on God, it works. When you're running away from God, when you're doing things against God's will, well, then you're going to have a lot of strain in your marriage, and you will be facing, just as Josh and Emily faced, potential divorce. But here's the good news. God wants healthy marriages. He wants husbands and wives to love one another. He wants children to love their parents, and He wants parents to love their children. Why does He want this? Because He wants righteousness. When you have these things in place, righteousness just seems to flow. You see it in Josh's face, you see it in Emily's face. They found it. It's obvious. They had to turn from what they were doing. They had to confess what they were doing, and they had to find that forgiveness that can only come from Him. And Josh, in an act of incredible humility, says, well, Emily, I'm going to wash your feet. I'm going to tell you that you're welcome back with me. That's what God does for each one of us. That's what Jesus does for His disciples. He girds Himself and He washes you so that you can be with Him. You can be seated at His table, part of His family. If you want this for your marriage, if you want this for your life, here's a very simple prayer. Jesus, I need you. I don't need the things that I've been pursuing. I need you. If you really can forgive me, if you really can restore me, if you can really make all things new, I surrender. I come to you, and I ask that you would show up. I can't do this, but you can. Can you show me what to do? Can you show me how to live, what to say? Can you change my heart and give me this kind of love? If you'll do this, Jesus, I want to follow you all the days of my life. If you pray that with all of your heart, He'll answer. He'll show up for you. If you're having trouble in your marriage, we've got something free for you. It's an absolutely free packet called Love and Marriage. All you have to do is call us. We'll send you a link where you can download it. You can go to cbn.com. If you like a physical copy, you can call us, 1-800-700-7000. Terry, over to you.
Well, coming up, 4 kids and finances stretched thin. This family was drained financially, emotionally, and spiritually. See how you came to their rescue. That is next.
When you're lied to, there's a certain amount of betrayal that takes place. We both came to the realization that there was no hope in this marriage. I just felt the Holy Spirit really impressing in me to look past my own pain and to see how Christ sees her. God was doing something in me and doing something in her.
I felt God tell me that I needed to get on my face before Him.
And it was 3 days after finding out that an affair was taking place, I was able to genuinely forgive. I saw such a clear vision of these chains that were attached to her. And I was like, no, I just want her to be free. And in that moment, God did something so miraculous.
I was so sorry for how I had hurt him. I just asked him if he could forgive me, and our marriage has never been the same since then.
He took something that was so broken, and because of genuine forgiveness and genuine repentance, he made something so beautiful.
Tyler and his wife Roxanne lost 3 loved ones during the pandemic. It took a toll on them, emotionally and financially. To make ends meet, the couple turned to a food pantry, and they received more than groceries. They were also given hope.
After Tyler and Roxanne got married and started a family, they lived on Tyler's income while both pursued degrees in psychology and pastoral counseling. After the arrival of their 4th child, finances were tight. Then COVID left their family shattered.
2020, I had lost my parents and my biological father, and that was really rough.
Each time they went home to Oklahoma to be with family, they had to rent cars with enough room for 4 kids.
We're drained in pretty much every aspect you can look at it. Financially, emotionally, spiritually.
The extra travel expenses took their toll. They needed help making ends meet, so they turned to Heritage Church, a partner of Operation Blessing.
When we went to the food pantry, it was a lot of kind of relief and a lot of gratitude, just an overwhelming sense of love.
Receiving the food really helped to restore a lot of hope, like a reminder from God, like it's going to be okay. And if He can supply food, He'll supply the rest.
Tyler and Roxanne have now graduated with their counseling degrees and look forward to helping others. Thanks to the support of our partners, Tyler and Roxanne's family received the help they needed when they needed it the most.
There were times I don't know who would have had anything if we didn't have that, so thank you.
Those who are part of Operation Blessing, I say thank you so much. You've helped out in more ways than you know.
The thank you from that family and so many others whose stories we aren't telling today goes right out to you. If you are a CBN partner, then you are making the difference. We want to say thank you. There are many who don't know where to go when they find their hope in places like this food pantry, and they find Jesus there as well. So we thank you for making that possible. We say thank you for making a difference, for caring, for your compassion, for your gratitude, graciousness. And we have a gift to send to you to say thank you, make a difference in your life. It's called Divine Direction. This is Gordon's latest teaching, God's blueprint for your future. I think you're going to love it. We want it to be yours, and it's our gift to you when you call our toll-free number, 1-800-700-7000 right now, and say, I want to join the 700 Club. So join with the rest of us. We'll get your gift out to you right away. Okay, you ready for some email questions?
Oh, I think
sure.
we have time for it.
Yeah, okay. This is Tina, who said, I was raised Catholic, and we were taught to pray to Mary and other saints. A person I know told me that it's wrong to pray to Mary or other saints, as it's not in the Bible. Is this true? Thank you.
Well, Tina, here's what the Bible says, and you find it in the book of First Timothy. This is Paul's letter. For there is one God and one mediator between God and men, the man Christ Jesus, who gave himself a ransom for all. When you understand that it's Jesus that's the door, and he says to us, here's how you should pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be your name. He is the one who gives us access to the Father. He is the door, and he is the only begotten of the Father. You can pray to Jesus, you can pray to the Holy Spirit, but Jesus tells us we get direct access to the Father. If you have that, and you have that mediator and that door already open, why would you use anybody else? What's the point? You have access to the Creator. I encourage you, use it, take it. Don't get another mediator. You've got one, and he paid a very dear price for you to have that access.
Mm-hmm. This is Giovanni, who says, I still need help forgiving a pastor of a church who gossiped about me and said all kinds of hurtful things about me. I told her that I love her with the love of the Lord, but I'm still feeling the pain from the insults. Should I forgive her face to face and never go back to the church?
Sometimes with forgiveness, it's better to forgive and not do it face to face. If she asks you for forgiveness, then by all means forgive her face to face. But I think it's better for you if you just walk in that forgiveness. Now, you've got to make a choice. Do you want to continue being at that church? Do you want to have this person have the ability to continually offend you? I encourage you to forgive 7 times 70, but I also encourage people, it's okay to establish boundaries. It's okay to stand up for yourself, and as part of that, if you lead the church, then I think God may open a door to another one. Here's a word from Lamentations. The Lord is my portion, says my soul. Therefore, I will hope in him. God bless you. We'll see you again tomorrow.
Tomorrow, in the swamps of Virginia,
venomous snakes, biting insects and flies.
A refuge for runaway slaves.
It tells us how horrible slavery was.
50,000 called these wetlands home.
The conditions here were better for them than being enslaved.
Many more. The last road to freedom.
If you get to the dismal swamp, you're almost home free.
Their secrets tomorrow on the 700 Club.
New from Gordon Robertson, Divine Direction, God's blueprint for your future.
If you are in Christ, you are a new creature. Old things are passed away. Behold, all things are become new. We can go boldly to the throne of grace and receive our requests. The King is always available for his children. We belong to God.
Divine Direction, God's blueprint for your future. Available now.
If you need prayer or would like to partner with us, call the CBN Hope Line today. For viewers in Australia, call 02 7908 0700. If you are in New Zealand, please call 04 488 0700 or visit our website at cbnaustralasia.org. If you are in the UK, call 0300 561 0700 or visit our website at cbneurope.com.